what God is doing. He's the manna in the wilderness, right? Well, there are these people out in the wilderness, and he comes out and he does that. Jesus, he walks on the water, and God, parts the sea. There are all of these little things that happen that show Jesus as the one who succeeds where Israel failed. And so there's that anti-type kind of thing that goes on. But there is legitimately, it's not by accident, I think, that the gospel begins with this temptation of Jesus. He goes and he faces temptation. He faces what John refers to as the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. When he's in the wilderness, he faces all three of those things. And in some respect, all sins boil down to that. And so Jesus faces those and he overcomes in the flesh. And so that tells you something, that what we do in the flesh matters. And it has an impact on our eternal relationship with God. And so much, and when you stop and think about it, so much of what's written in Scripture about how we behave in the flesh is directly associated with how we interact with other human beings, right? The Ten Commandments, there are the relationship to God, right? Have no other gods, don't take the Lord's name in vain, Sabbath, and so on and so forth. Interestingly enough, the don't take the Lord's name in vain is not primarily about using God as a curse. It is saying that you are a follower of God and then not actually being a follower of God. The name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. That's what Paul said in the book of Romans. But nonetheless, then you look at the rest of the commandments, right? Don't kill. Well, who am I going to kill? Don't steal. Well, who am I going to steal from? Don't commit adultery. Well, who am I going to commit adultery with? Don't lie. Don't bear false witness. Well, who am I going to lie to? Who am I going to bear false witness against? Don't covet. Well, who am I going to covet? Right? See, all of those things have to do with our relationships with one another, and they're done in the flesh. They're done internally as well. But so John is bringing all of that together, and he's saying, yeah, it really matters. And Jesus overcame all of those things in the flesh, and he becomes the perfect sacrifice. Going back, he is our Passover, but he also is, he fulfills all of the roles of all of the sacrifices. He's our peace offering. He's our trespass offering. He is the offering on the Day of Atonement. He is all of those things. The Lamb that takes away the sin of the world is how John describes him. And what we know about those lambs was they had to be perfect. You go all the way back to the Garden of Eden, and you see the beginning of sacrifice. And Cain and Abel come and bring a sacrifice to God, an offering to God, and one is accepted and one is rejected. And I think, the older I get, the more I think that the problem with Cain's sacrifice at that time was not that he offered the produce of the field. It was that he didn't give his best. Now I understand there's this theme that, of blood flowing all the way through the Old Testament and all the way into the New Testament. And, so Abel, but it says Abel gave of what? The fat. What did it say of Cain? He said, an. Cain gave an offering. Abel gave of the fat. He gave the best. He gave the pure. He gave that which cost him something. Cain just brought something that probably he was going to throw away anyway, if I may judge him at this point. And one of the things, though, that we see throughout Scripture is that when God says bring an offering, he says bring your best. Now, a lamb that is born spotless had nothing to do with that. The lamb had nothing to do with being born spotless. But a man who has born into a world filled with temptation, a man who was born with the potential to sin, to give in to temptation, and chooses holiness every single time. Now that is perfection. And that's who Jesus was. And so we talk about the importance of that. And so John ends then with this, keep yourselves from idols. And it just seems kind of weird because he hasn't mentioned idols at all, but that's why it's so important. Because if we have a false concept of God or a false concept of Jesus, one that is contrary to what God has revealed to us in Scripture, then we're serving an idol. And John says, keep yourselves from idols. But he doesn't say anything about keep yourselves from donuts. So there are some donuts back there. And it is Friendship Day, so we are wrapping up a little early so that we might enjoy that. Next week we'll get into 2 John. We'll have a little guide and introduction. And Lord willing, we'll have it all wrapped up by the end of April.